And our opening words this morning are by my colleague John Millspaugh. Leave aside the little thoughts that distract you from the depths of your soul. For this is a holy place, and now is a holy time. Join with the others in this room, this community of seekers, and together let us find our Sabbath. Spirit of life, let this moment be enough. Let our breathing in and breathing out tether us to this moment, here and now, so that we do not tumble headlong into the next. May we use this time to slow down, unclench our bodies, melt deeper into our seats, settle into our center. May we use this time to let go of disappointments and move beyond old words. May we use this time to refill our cup. May we find here what we need to feed our spirits, heal our wounds, express our joy. May we find here what we need to return to the world refreshed and awake. Spirit of life, let this moment, this living now, be enough. Amen. One of the greatest privileges we have as a community is to welcome new members among us. This morning we have a new member welcome ceremony, and I invite our 5 new members, our membership committee, Pastor Brenda, forward to the front for our new member welcome. Oh, please bring your inserts, you'll need those. What a privilege to welcome again our new members. Our first reading this morning comes from Luke chapter 10, verses 38 through 42. As Jesus and his disciples were on their way, he came to a village where a woman named Martha opened her home to him. She had a sister called Mary, who sat at the Lord's feet listening to what he said. But Martha was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. She came to him and asked, "Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do the work by myself? Tell her to help me." "Martha, Martha," the Lord answered, "you are worried and upset about many things, but few things are needed, or indeed only one. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken away from her." Our second reading is by Anne Alexander Bingham. To know that the atoms of my body will remain, to think of them rising through the roots of a great oak, to live in leaves, branches, twigs, perhaps to feed the crimson peony, the blue iris, the broccoli, or rest on water, freeze and thaw with the seasons. Some atoms might become a bit of fluff on the wing of a chickadee, to feel the breeze, know the support of air. And some might drift up and up into space, stardust, returning from whence it came. It is enough to know that as long as there is a universe, I am a part of it. Not because of victories I sing, having none, but for the common sunshine, the breeze, the largesse of the spring. Not for victory, but for the day's work done as well as I was able. Not for a seat upon the dais, but at the common table. At the end of June, I gathered with hundreds of my colleagues in Providence for ministry days. It was wonderful to be together, to laugh and learn and worship with colleagues. One of the worship services was called the 2550 service, and it honored ministers who have been doing ministry for 25 and 50 years. Amazing. Reverend Dave Johnson, by the way, was honored at that service for his 50 years of ministry. I recognized him right away. He was the one with buttons pinned all over his stole with messages of peace and justice and protest on them. Each cohort chose from among their peers one person to preach. And so there were two incredible sermons by Reverend Victoria Safford and Reverend Judith Walker Riggs. And they chose that reading to be part of their service. Not for victory, but for the day's work done as well as I was able. Not for a seat upon the dais, but at the common table. Charles Reznikoff. What a humble and noble notion that the seat we should be striving for is not the one upon the dais, but the one at the common table. That what we should be most proud of is a day's work done as well as we were able. It's true that ministers only preach sermons that they themselves need to hear. And so I think of my colleagues looking back on 25 and 50 years of ministry, not having achieved any great fame, and certainly not great fortune, but seeking a certain level of contentment, knowing that they had done a good day's work, had contributed what they were able, had lived according to their values, and through that gained an honored seat at the common table. It's a different version of success than the one we are usually given. I contrast this idea of success with a wonderful term I read recently, coined by Jim Collins, the undisciplined pursuit of more. So often I think our striving for success falls more into this latter category. We think that to be successful, we need to have more. More money, more things, more acclaim. We fill and fill and fill our lives when really the void we are trying to fill will never be satiated by things. And the contentment we seek is one that cannot be bought or scheduled. Collins has studied the undisciplined pursuit of more as it relates to the business world. That is his field. Over the past several years, he and his team have studied 11 once great companies that have fallen into irrelevance. They compared each company with one of a similar age and size in the same business that has continued to prosper. He published his findings in a book entitled How the Mighty Fall. Though leaders tend to put their faith in drive, creativity, and hard work, he says, the evidence shows that many of the companies that fell did so during periods of intense innovation. HP doubled its patent filings even in the midst of its decline. Rubbermaid was drowning in hundreds of new product innovations every year. So the book's most surprising insight is that, contrary to professional leadership wisdom, it is not complacency that brings the mighty down, but overreaching. Like Martha, these companies were busy, busy, busy. But they did not sit and listen like Mary. They did not create space for examining how each new thing related to and enhanced their core. Now, I have a soft spot for Martha. I can sympathize with her entirely. It is annoying when you are doing all of the work and no one is helping you. But if I had to choose, I would be Mary, sitting at Jesus' feet, present, listening. What else could be more important? If each of us were asked to write a sermon after 25 or 50 years of ministry, whatever our ministry happens to be, would we write about our regrets, that we didn't clean more, or do more, or even have more? Or would we look back in gratitude on those moments when we were fully present, when we simply listened with our whole being to the person before us and received the full blessing of their company? It's unlikely that we will ever be given that preaching assignment. So perhaps we need to periodically give ourselves that spiritual homework, to reflect deeply on what is most important, what is at the core, what sustains us, what connects us. If we are not creating spaces to examine what has actually been fulfilling in our lives, if we are simply striving without a clear idea of what we are striving for, we are unwittingly living out an undisciplined pursuit of more. We are at risk of filling our lives with new product lines that look great, but which add no extra value to our company and take an awful lot of energy to maintain. When I first graduated from college, I was living in Boston and working at a publishing company downtown. My desk was in the hallway. It was humiliating and quite distracting to sit in the hallway. And everyone could see what I was doing all the time, not a moment of privacy all day. Now, on my lunch hour, I would get the heck out of there. All of the editorial assistants chipped in and bought an enormous picnic blanket, and we would walk to the public garden to have our lunch. I made some lasting friendships on that picnic blanket. But when it was raining, I had to find some other way to fill the lunch hour, and I was surely not going to stay at my hallway desk. The building I was working in was on Boylston Street, and it was connected to all of the buildings on the block through a walkway on the ground floor. Now, one of the buildings was a Marshall's, so this was my favorite destination on the rainy days. I would wander down there and take the escalator up to the women's clothing section. I would try on dresses and shoes, find the perfect outfit over and over again, or the must-have sweater that used to be $79.99, but now, amazingly, was only $24.50. What a deal. I enjoyed those lunch hour shopping sprees. But as you can imagine, as an editorial assistant who had not yet risen in the ranks enough even to merit her own particle board walls, I wasn't making very much money. So I developed a system for those lunch hour shopping sprees. I left my wallet at my desk. It wasn't that I never allowed myself to buy anything, but I figured that anything worth buying on my meager salary would have to be worth trekking back up to the 5th floor and back for. And you know what? It hardly ever was. Things that I just couldn't live without while I was in the store lost their appeal as I thought about going back down the elevator for them. Items that a few moments ago felt like must-haves suddenly seemed kind of similar to something I already owned. Or I remembered that it didn't fit quite right around the arms. Rarely did I go back for anything. I often have to remind myself of the lessons I learned during those years just out of school. Remember, ministers only preach sermons that they themselves need to hear. I have to remind myself that some aspirations for more are valid. I really wanted out of that hallway, and I worked hard to advocate for myself in order to, after a year, get my very own cubicle. I also have to remind myself that some aspirations for more don't hold up to the elevator ride. Many of the things we think will make us happy are not really essential to our happiness at all when we give it some more thought and space. I have to remind myself that sometimes the best investment of all is something as simple as a picnic blanket. Life coach Bob Perks tells the story of being at an airport and overhearing a father and daughter in their last moments together. They had announced her plane's departure, and standing near the security gate, they hugged, and he said, "I love you. I wish you enough." She said, "Dad, our life together has been more than enough. Your love is all I ever needed. I wish you enough too, Dad." They kissed goodbye and she left. He walked over to the window where Bob was seated, and Bob could see that he was on the verge of tears. "Did you ever say goodbye to someone knowing it would be forever?" the man asked. "Forgive me for asking," said Bob, "but why is this a forever goodbye?" "I am old," the man said, "and she lives much too far away. The reality is, her next trip back will be for my funeral." "When you were saying goodbye, I heard you say, 'I wish you enough,'" said Bob. "May I ask what that means?" The man began to smile. That's a wish that has been handed down in my family. My parents used to say it to everyone. He paused for a moment as if reaching into the past for the words. I wish you enough sun to keep your attitude bright. I wish you enough rain to appreciate the sun. I wish you enough happiness to keep your spirit alive. I wish you enough pain so that the smallest joys in life appear much bigger. I wish you enough gain to satisfy your wanting. I wish you enough loss to appreciate all that you possess. I wish you enough hellos to get you through final goodbyes. It's a good blessing. Instead of more, maybe we can pursue enough. David White, one of my favorite poets, wrote a poem of that title that I'll close with. Enough. These few words are enough. If not these words, this breath. If not this breath, this sitting here. This opening to the life we have refused again and again, until now. Until now. Amen, and blessed be.